Hey there, I'm Nicole Wilbur. I'm a writer and story nerd, and welcome back to my channel. I am coming to you live from Florence, Italy, my new filming location. I'm sorry the background is so boring. I'm gonna work on that, try to make it a little more interesting. But welcome. Today is the first video in a series of videos that I am going to be doing about trying the full story grid process from start to finish. Now there is a book called The Story Grid, as well as a ton of blogs and resources and courses and podcasts. There's so much stuff that it can be kind of hard to figure out exactly what the story grid process is. So I messed around a ton on the Story Grid website trying to get a sense of like what is the definitive, story grid process. And I found a page where they get people, I guess, to submit to their publishing house. I guess they have a publishing house or something like that. And they list what they ask people to give them. So we're gonna say that that is the definitive, what is the story grid process. So this is what it is. So it is the editor's 6 core questions. Then there's a genre positioning statement. After that, there is the Foolscap global story grid, and then there is the story grid spreadsheet and story grid, which is like a literal graph. I have actually done all of these things in preparation for this video, and I am going to talk through each of them and kind of tell you my process and share my materials. So I'm going to be sharing most of them on my website, and some of them are going to be exclusively in my newsletter. So if you aren't signed up for that, think about doing it. I did this for my book, A Christmas Harmony, which it's a novella in short. So today's video is all about the editor's 6 core questions. Now, this is an editing tool, right? So this is not me coming up with a new story idea. This is me using the story grid as it was traditionally meant to be used for editing a finished manuscript. Finished, being, I don't know, like on the 4th or 5th draft or something like that. Trying to make sure that the story works and to see where I can improve it. So here we go. The editor's 6 core questions are as follows. Number 1, what's the genre? Number 2, what are the conventions and obligatory scenes for the genre? Number 3, what's the point of view? Number 4, what are the objects of desire? Number 5, what's the controlling idea or theme? And number 6, what is the beginning hook, the middle build, and the ending payoff? And as I said before, when you go and subscribe to my newsletter on my website, you will be able to see a somewhat redacted version of my answers to the 6 core questions, but I will be walking you through them right now. So the first question is, what is the genre? Now, I'm just going to be kind of telling you my thought process. Please don't take this as like the gospel of the story grid, because I'm just learning just like you are. So if you hear something that doesn't sound right or that sounds off, do let me know, because I'm learning. We're learning together, and I hope it can be helpful to watch me kind of learn through my process, So when I read the question, what is the genre? I immediately thought of the genre 4-leaf, 5-leaf, 4-leaf, 5-leaf, the genre clover that the story grid uses. It's in the story grid book. So the genres are time. So is it short, long form, or medium, being how much time the story takes place over. The next one is reality. So is it fantasy, realism, absurdism, factualism, etc. Style. So that is musical, dance, cartoons, novel, drama, comedy. Structure is mini plot, arch plot. I think those are the 2. Oh, anti-plot. So that's kind of the traditional structure, with arch plot being the most common one. So arch plot just is like you have a single protagonist. It's kind of your hero's journey. Mini plot is lots of characters undergoing kind of like smaller stories. And then you have your content genre, which is what we usually think of genre, that being your action, your horror, your thriller, your crime, etc., etc. I had an advantage of this because I did use the story grid at the beginning in terms of thinking through my novella in short. So the structure of this is actually mini plot because it follows 7 separate characters for one scene or short story. The style, I'm not sure if the style would be novella in short, because that's kind of what it is, because he has like dance and plays and drama and stuff like that in that clover, so it might be novella in short as the style. But I also thought the style might be classic because it's just like a classically told sort of story where I aimed for the text style to be kind of classical, you know? The reality was easy, that's realism. The time, I believe the time was referring to not the length of the thing, but the time over which the story takes place. And I remember reading that in the book, but I'm not entirely sure if that's right. So I said the time was long because this spans from 1985 to 2019. And then the genre, my content genre, I said it was worldview education. Now, usually worldview education is an internal genre. You start off with meaninglessness and you go to meaning is kind of the value shift of the genre, and it's really an internal genre, so focused on a character's journey. But because it's set at Christmas time, and this is not part of the story grid, but it does kind of fall into sort of a subgenre of like worldview education Christmas. Like, for example, It's a Wonderful Life. So that's the genre. Now that was just one question of the editor's 6 core questions. Next time I'm gonna go into the full genre positioning statement that I did. The next question is, what are the conventions and obligatory scenes of the genre? So I'm looking at the conventions and obligatory scenes for the genre of worldview education. So for this part, I relied really heavily on a blog post by, I believe it's Rochelle Ramirez, called Secrets of the Worldview Genre, that I will link below, but I will just read a quick description of what worldview education is defined as in this blog post, and sort of it'll give you an idea as to why I chose that genre as well. So the education story is about a protagonist's shift in worldview from meaningless to meaning, which is what I said. A sympathetic protagonist faces a threat to their view of life and emerges into a new and better kind of wholeness at the end. The story arc is an attitude change in which the familiar takes on meaning. The education story is not meant to educate the reader, but to show the protagonist becoming someone. The core emotion is relief and pleasure. This is like the generic controlling idea. You can make it specific to your story. And the controlling idea is like the theme statement. We gain meaning when we learn to express our gifts in a world which we accept as paradoxical and imperfect. Examples being Educating Rita, Tender Mercies, and How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Also, The Fundamentals of Caring is one. Using that article, there are numerous conventions, and I'm not going to tell you how I fulfilled these in every single way, but I will kind of talk through them. So the conventions are the following: at least one mentor figure. Now there's no like mentor, like there's no traditional mentor figures in my story. So this took me a second. I was like, I don't have any men with white beards walking in and giving advice. But I was trying to think, okay, if we think of a mentor as someone whose words or whose situation influences another person and kind of it helps them accelerate that change. So I have had numerous mentor figures. Laura's mother, Noah, Sky, and Emmerich all serve as mentor figures for different characters throughout the book, because in every story there's a different point of view character. So some point of view characters show up as mentors in other stories, and then, yeah. So it has a large social problem as the subtext of the story. So my social problem is addiction and alcoholism forming the backdrop of the story. It says clear threat of escalating danger. So that's just like the stakes are being raised. So I'm not going to go into detail on like what my threat is, but that's one of the conventions. Another convention is to have a shapeshifter or hypocritical character. I do have a shapeshifter, which is pretty fun. I like her a lot. I actually have 2 shapeshifters in my story. Again, not going to say it, just spoilers. A cause and effect trajectory. So basically, cause and effect trajectory, characters do something, there's an immediate effect. That's a convention. So on a global level, just thinking really abstract here, each of my characters' individual decisions impacts the lives of subsequent characters and feeds into the next story. And then finally, accelerated development, which just means this happens really quick. Each story is centered on a pretty much singular moment of character change, so we catch up with the character just before they take decisive action, which is more rapid than you'd expect in real life. And that's actually a part of worldview education. In real life, people will kind of change bit by bit by bit, but in worldview education, you kind of show that development a little bit accelerated, so you have sort of big changes happening overnight. Another good example of worldview education is A Christmas Carol. And you can, because I just said overnight, you see the change happening in him overnight, and he's suddenly super generous and stuff. Okay, so in addition to the conventions of the worldview genre, I also identified some conventions of like the Christmas genre. This is not from the story grid, but again, I felt that this was relevant. So I sort of saw like two rituals, or two conventions. The first one being the story is set against the backdrop of holiday rituals. There is Thanksgiving dinner, decorating the tree, performing in the Christmas pageant, caroling, and sending gifts. And another convention is that the holiday rituals provide fuel for characters to change, because holidays can be so like energetically ramped up because there's so much history to them and so much family and stuff. The characters are interacting with these holiday rituals. They're not only the backdrop, but in some cases, they're kind of the center of the action. And this story was really fun. If you saw my video about my scene is boring, in this story, I was really able to use holidays as that kind of central action around which the characters were speaking. So in terms of obligatory scenes, I'm not going to talk about the ones in my story because I would have to like go through all of them, but these are kind of like your beats, kind of like in Save the Cat, but they're a little less, they're just different. They're just different beats. So the obligatory events are an inciting incident challenges the protagonist's worldview. Obviously, it's worldview education. There has to be a challenge to it. They deny responsibility to respond, so they say no, they refuse the call. The protagonist lashes out because they are still in their little worldview that's like this, and they don't want to change. Then you have a point of no return, where they get to a bit where they really can't go back. They can only change. Then you have the all is lost moment. This is when they've lost everything and everything looks terrible. Then you have character expresses their gift as an acceptance of an imperfect world. So this is usually, I've always been kind of confused about the character's gift, but I usually think of it as like ability to love. Then we have the protagonist's loss of innocence is rewarded. So their worldview has changed, but they have gained something good from it. And then you have a bittersweet ending. So there is, like a win-lose, like it's not all wins, but there's some wins, but there's also a little bit of an undertone of like, oh no, kind of like in A Christmas Carol where Mr. Donald Duck is just what I'm thinking of, but not actually. Ebenezer Scrooge, that's his name. He runs to Tiny Tim and brings them food, but Tiny Tim is still really sick, so it's a bittersweet ending. Unless he actually gets cured, but I don't think that happens. Okay, question number 3 is what's the point of view? Thank you. I know the answer to this one. It's first person present tense from 7 different narrators. Done, easy, woohoo. Okay. Number 4 is what are the objects of desire? I did write out what every individual character wanted, but I also kind of have an overarching, all of the characters sort of have a similar thing where each character begins their story by wanting to maintain the status quo. So for example, Laura wants her husband to be as he was when they were married. And then all of the characters, again, have a specific object of desire that fits into that maintain the status quo situation. Number 5 is what is the controlling idea or theme? So again, from Secrets of the Worldview genre, they said controlling idea is we gain meaning when we learn to express our gifts in a world which we accept as paradoxical and imperfect. I was really thinking through mine and thinking through kind of all of the actions that the characters take and what happens. And one thing that I felt the way I figured that you could personalize this was to specify like what that gift is. So the protagonist chooses to express their gift. So say like, what are they expressing? What is the gift? And then it says, in spite of the world being paradoxical and imperfect. So like being specific is like, what is the paradoxical or imperfect part? And going through my story, I eventually got to, we gain meaning when we choose to reach out and accept the love of others despite the risk of being hurt. So even though this isn't a romance story per se, it's a worldview education, it does kind of really center around love because it's a family story. And then finally, we have our beginning hook, middle build, and ending payoff. That's question number 6. So it's a little hard to describe. I kind of assumed they wanted you to describe the beginning hook, middle build, and ending payoff just in like one sentence each, or like a little baby paragraph each, because you have the full Foolscap global story grid coming up. So that's what I did. The beginning hook obviously is the beginning of the story. The middle build is the middle. The ending payoff is the end. So they just say, you know, write a sentence about the beginning, middle, and end. Beautiful. So in the beginning hook, a husband, Rob, and wife, Laura, grapple with the husband's alcoholism, which threatens their relationship and their 2 young children, Noah and Sky. In the middle build, Sky and Noah grapple with their family relationships at Christmas time on opposite sides of the world. And in the ending payoff, I would write that down if I wasn't like posting this on YouTube, you know? So that's just the beginning, middle, and end of my story. And that is the end of the editor's 6 core questions. That took a hot minute, but it was mostly pretty straightforward. I felt like the conventions and obligatory scenes really made me think, and I'm wondering honestly how helpful this method is. If you listen to the podcast, there are times where Shawn, Coyne, and Tim Grahl would be like, okay, this is my inciting incident, and then Shawn Coyne would be like, that works. And then sometimes he'd be like, that doesn't work. And I feel like there's no point where they would say like why that works or why that doesn't work. Like he would say, my inciting incident is X. And sometimes Shawn Coyne would say, no, that doesn't work. Is that just instinct? Do I have to have somebody else look over my sheet to figure out if it works or not? Many, many questions, but it was an interesting exercise, and it was kind of cool to go through and just like document and really think analytically about the story, especially to come up with the controlling idea and the theme. So those are the editor's 6 core questions. Let me know what you thought about this video and these questions. Would you find them helpful? Have you thought of doing something like this for your story? And thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, do give it a thumbs up. If you are not subscribed, you should do that, and if you want to, of course. And I will see you next time.